What's up, everybody? Evan Mazza here for another episode of MazzaOnMets. It's been a while. It's been a week. I was originally supposed to do a show on Friday, but we had to. But I decided to save for today because we're at the halfway point now of the 2025 MLB season for the New York Mets. We're at the All-Star break. Today is Home Run Derby Day on Monday night. Tomorrow is the All-Star game. So I figured do the show today, recap everything that happened last week in the last two road series of the season for the New York Mets, and then give the Mets out grades, talk about what happened during the games, and give the Mets out grades for their season. Kind of talk about their first half and how I feel they did so far, how I feel they did in the first half, where they're at in the standings, what their record is, where I think they could be better at, where I think they can improve on as we head to the second half. We'll actually save most of that for a Thursday Friday show. There's a lot to get into today on MazzaOnMets. But we begin today, obviously, with the New York Mets. They began their road trip, 6-game road trip at Baltimore, at Kansas City, fresh off defeating the New York Yankees 2 out of 3 in the Subway Series and defeating the Milwaukee Brewers 2 out of 3. So they entered Baltimore with momentum on their side, a bit of momentum, finally, a bit of momentum on their side after they went on this really rough stretch where they lost 13 to 17. So they entered Baltimore hoping to continue their stretch of series wins and get like I said a week ago or so, get the train back on track. And it started off pretty well on Tuesday, where they had their best comeback of the season. They were down 6-2 in the eighth inning. Uh, Clay Holmes pitched well through 5 innings. He pitched on Tuesday against the Baltimore Orioles. He pitched well for 5 innings, but in the sixth inning, things kind of went awry for him. The Mets took the lead in the top of the sixth to go up 2-1, and then things kind of went awry for Clay Holmes in the bottom half of the sixth inning. He uh, he hit Jackson Holiday. He gave up a single to Jordan Westburg. Gunnar Henderson singled. Ryan O'Hearn doubled to give the Orioles a 3-2 lead. Ramon Laureano got a base hit to give the Orioles a 5-2 lead. Richard Lovelady came in to replace Clay Holmes. And then he gives up a couple flyouts, a Tyler O'Neill hit by pitch. He's able to get out of the inning with no runs scored. But so that was right after the Mets just took the lead. Brandon Nimmo had an RBI double to give them the lead. Mauricio hit a homer to tie the game 1-1. So Clay Holmes, 5 innings was pretty good. It's just that in the sixth inning, things was a bit of a things kind of struggled for him. He went 5 innings, 7 hits, 5 earned runs, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. Not his last start of the first half. Obviously, he had another start on Sunday or yesterday. We'll talk about that. But yeah, that was Holmes' start for that day. But the Mets were down 6-2. The Orioles added another run in the top of the seventh, in the bottom of the seventh, excuse me. And then the top of the eighth, 6-2 Orioles. Looks like the Mets are going to drop this thing. Looks like, the Mets aren't scoring any runs, only 2 runs. Looks like the Orioles are going to take this one. But as has been the case throughout this season, when the Mets offense has been able to get runs, as they've been able to score and score, when they've been able to, it's been at the top of the order. In the top of the eighth, it began at the top of the order. Brandon Nimmo, base hit. And then Mr. Clutch himself, the guy who has come through time and time again for this team over the last, let's say, several years, but most especially the last couple of years, Francisco Lindor. It's a 2-run homer to cut the lead 6-4. Juan Soto then steps up to the plate. He gets a key base hit, which sets up Pete Alonso's game-tying 2-run homer to right center field, and that tied the game. And it's just like that. That's just what this team is. It's just what they do. In the top of the order, that's where they get the most production. Sorry, a little tea there, a little water with lemon, actually. But that's just who they are. This is a team that will score at the top of the order. That is their strength. Their strength is at the top 5, top 6 of the order. So if you're going to make a comeback like that, it's got to be at the top of the order. And the top of the order, those guys came through clutch for them on Tuesday night. They're able to hold it to 6-6 as they head into the top of the 10th. They go to the top of the 10th, and there's that man again, Juan Soto, who finished the first half of the season strong after an inconsistent first 2 months. He finishes off the first half of the season strong. He had a 3-hit day on this game, but in the top of the 10th, he gets the go-ahead base hit at the top of the 10th to put the Mets up 7-6. And then Oscar Brazoban, who replaced Edwin Diaz because Diaz pitched the scoreless ninth, He gets a 1-2-3 top of the 10th, and the Mets complete maybe their best. I wouldn't say complete win of the season, but maybe their best win of the season, period. Certainly, maybe their most feel good win of the season. They came back down 6-2 late in the game, looked like they were going to drop another game after, like I said, getting that momentum in the series against the Yankees and the series against the Brewers. It, just a really, really nice comeback. You know, being down 6-2, Holmes kind of, Holmes struggling in the top of the sixth, but the team scrapped together, showed some mettle, showed some toughness, showed some balance. And the top of the order, they're big bats, right? They're big boys. Nimmo, Lindor, Soto a couple of times, Alonso, Ronnie Mauricio, but even Ronnie Mauricio, someone like Ronnie Mauricio, he had a game time homer early in the game. But they're big boys. They're big boys, stepped up and put the team on their back and tied the game and gave them the lead. And that's what the Mets need to do going forward a bit. As I said again, said this before, but this is kind of what the Mets have to do going forward. They're big five. I know Steve Cohen after the game called the Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, Alonso the Fab Four, but you know, whatever. It's Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, Jeff McNeil. You know, those are the guys that need to step up and kind of carry the load here for this team, especially as the Mets pitching kind of now starts to come back into place. And we'll get to the starting pitching in a second because the starting pitching now has formed up now, has kind of come back into motion now, as we now head into the second half of the season starting on Friday night against the Cincinnati Reds. But this is where they are, and that's where the Mets offense needs to be. They have to kind of be like this. But as we've known and as we've said, baseball is a 162 game marathon. And all it took was 2 days for everyone to get excited and be happy about the comeback win against the Orioles. They won. That was their fifth win in their last seven. And it took one day to flip the switch on that a bit because the second game of this 3-game series of Baltimore got rained out. And we had a doubleheader on Thursday, and the Mets ended up getting swept in the doubleheader. And obviously, the worst one that we have to talk about is game one. Game two, I mean, there's not really much to talk about in game two. It was a bullpen game. They struggled, couldn't score runs. Bullpen kind of struggled a bit in that game. The Orioles ended up winning this one, I believe. 7-3. There really isn't much. And the Mets did take an early 2-0 lead in this game, but with the bullpen game, that was, I think, a couple of Juan Soto base hits. It was a Juan Soto ground out and a Pete Alonso sac fly. But it's the Orioles in a bullpen game. It was, you knew the Orioles would score runs against this bullpen. They did, and they met, and the Orioles won 7-3. They took game two, but it all is about game one. It's really about game one of this series. And that doubleheader. This was the game the Mets had to have. The game, if they win game one of the doubleheader, we don't care about game two. We don't care. No one cares. No one cares about game two of the doubleheader loss. But it is game one of the doubleheader where we have to talk about. Because David Pearson was very good. David Pearson was very good again in his final start of the first half. 7 innings, 5 hits, 6 strikeouts, only gave up 1 earned run. But it's the Mets offense. And this is the problem. Again, this is the problem that only 2 days after they did so well in the late innings, they kind of you see the struggles. And in this game, the Mets offense went, let's look at it. 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position. They left 8 guys on base, had numerous chances to score, numerous chances to really put the game away early. But it was a 1-0 game going to the bottom of the 8th. Ryan Stanek comes into the game in the 8th inning, and he doesn't throw strikes at all. We saw, like I said, we've had good Ryan Stanek this season. We've had bad Ryan Stanek this season. The other day, but on this day, on Thursday afternoon, we saw bad Ryan Stanek. And he couldn't throw strikes, didn't have his command in there, and the Orioles tacked on 3 runs to win the game 3-1. But honestly, yes, as bad as Ryan Stanek was, I don't blame him for the loss. We could talk about Carlos Mendoza and how he handled the 8th inning and taking out David Pearson after he gave up the base hit to lead off the 8th inning, knowing that Gunnar Henderson was going to come up the pinch hit, and he did, and he ends up hitting a two-run homer to give the Orioles the lead off Ryan Stanek. We could talk about that all we want, but the bottom line is the reason they lost this game, you went 1 for 11 runners scoring position against. Let's check notes. Let's check who pitched for the Baltimore Orioles in this game. Oh, Charlie Morton, 41-year-old Charlie Morton with a five plus ERA coming into the game. I know he pitched better lately, and I know he has a good history against the Mets. I know he's had success against the Mets, but you cannot allow Charlie Morton, 40-something years old. You can't allow Charlie Morton at this stage. You can't allow Charlie Morton to beat you. You can't allow Charlie Morton to go 6 innings, 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, and you can't score off them. The Mets went 1 for 11 with runners scoring position, multiple opportunities to really score early and put the game and give David Pearson an advantage, give David Pearson a lead, and they just couldn't. So that's where the Mets really lost this doubleheader. Forget game two. Forget game two for a second. They lost this doubleheader in game one. And that's, I think, where the frustration comes from, where the frustration has certainly come from lately from the fan base, is that you have a great game like now it is baseball, but you have a game like that where you come back and your big four, big five, fat four, big four, big five in the lineup come through and mark this big comeback and get a big momentum. Now, yes, you had to rain out the next day, but you needed to kind of continue that into at least one of the next 2 games of the doubleheader, and you weren't able to. And like I said, game two is moot if game two doesn't mean anything unless if you win game one. And because they couldn't win game one and the game with Pearson was great, they couldn't win game one because they were 1 for 11 runners scoring position. Then they had to come back and try to win game two in a bullpen game. And that's what grew a lot of people's frustration. Oh, another bullpen game, another bullpen game, another bullpen game. Well, they had no choice but to throw a bullpen game because Sean Manaea wasn't ready to come back. He wouldn't come pitch till Sunday. Kodai Senga was scheduled to pitch on Friday. He was just coming back. The Mets really this was the Mets' last bullpen game, going good. Hopefully not going good for a while, because now the starting rotation is kind of back into place here as they head to the second half. But the Mets had to do a bullpen game again because their pitching has been so much in flux of, all month or all 2 months, but or at least the last month and a half. But they had to. But in a game like game one, and look, they've won some bullpen games. They won that bullpen game against the Yankees a few weeks over the last weekend, on July 4th weekend. But, you have to win game one to kind of not put yourself in that position. We have to win game two in a bullpen game. You win game one. And how do you do that? Well, you don't go 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position. You don't. You got to score. And they had second and third. In game one, they had second and third and nobody out. In the first inning for your Soto, for your Alonso, and for Jesse Winker. We'll talk about Jesse Winker in a bit. And what happens? Soto struck out. Alonso struck out. Winker popped out. You got to take advantage and score when you get second and third and nobody out. And they had other opportunities. Vientos had a double in one inning, and they couldn't drive him in. Tyrone Taylor, who has been struggling like crazy, he had an RBI double. He had the Mets' only run of that game, but he was on second with nobody out. Hey, here's your chance to tackle another run. Here's your chance to get another run. Hey, drive Tyrone Taylor in. They couldn't drive him in. He was stranded on second with nobody out. You got to when you get these opportunities, you've got to score. You've got to score runs. And that is, we'll get to the first half grades. I don't want to talk about this too much because I want to save this for later in the show. But but again, score runs. You can't go 1 for 11 runners scoring position. Can't. And that's how they lost this game and lost this doubleheader, really. So the Mets, unfortunately, couldn't follow up the big comeback win on Tuesday, and they drop another series. And I think that's what was kind of I think that was kind of frustrating too for the Mets and the Met fan, is that because there was a lot of talk, obviously, after this doubleheader loss about David Stearns. I saw it all over Mets Twitter. David Stearns, Mendoza, et cetera. But and I understand that. I do. I understand the frustration. They lost another series to a team they should have beaten, a team they should, look, the Orioles have played good baseball as of late. They played good baseball, but you should have won this series. But again, it comes down to game one. So came down to game one of the doubleheader. 1 for 11 runners scoring position. Tells you the whole story right there. But they lose another series as they head to Kansas City. And look, Kansas City is a tough, scrappy team, but this was a series and a team where you kind of had to You kind of had to take care of business and win, right? The Mets really needed, I think, in this series against Kansas City to just win a series and get back on track. It didn't matter how they did it. It didn't matter. Just find a way. They needed to, I think, win a series to get back on track. Just to just to feel good about yourself going to the All-Star break and say, okay, hey, we won three of our last four series as we head to the All-Star break. Game one against Kansas City, well, it doesn't start off like that. The Mets taking another 1-0 lead, but Kansas City, you know, tack on 3 runs. Bobby Witt hits a 2-run homer. Do have to point out first, this was the return of Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga, as expected, they limited him in his outing. I figure 5 innings for him, but I wasn't surprised that they went 4 innings, 4 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. He he worked his way out of jams early, worked his way out of a big jam early in the first inning. Struck out Salvador Perez very impressively. Um, you know, but Senga I thought was pretty darn solid. Again, only 4 innings, so it's not a huge sample size, but it was exactly. I wasn't surprised that he went 4 innings. It was the first game back for him. The All-Star break was coming up. I'm sure he's going to start on Friday against the Reds. So, but for what we saw through the first 4 innings, pretty good. And if he could pitch like that all season for the second half and stay healthy, hey, that's big. But he worked his way in and out of jams, and I think that's what makes him so good. That's what makes an ace an ace. When you're in jams, you work your way out of it. And he's probably the only pitcher. I think he's the only starting pitcher on this roster who, if he's in a jam, I have confidence. Not no offense to Sean Manaea, we'll get to him. No offense to David Pearson, but he's I think the only pitcher starter on this rotation who, if he gets into a jam, I have confidence he's going to get out of it. Why? You know, why? The darn ghost fork. It's a 2-strike pitch. The darn ghost fork. But he's also, I think, confident in himself and in his stuff that he can work his way out of a jam. And he did that through 4 innings. He did that through his 4 innings of work. But the Mets have to go to the bullpen. They go to the bottom of the sixth. Carrillo gives up a run, and then Oscar Brazaban gives up the 2-run homer to Bobby Witt. So we head to the top of the eighth. The Mets are down 3-1. They had been hitless, or not hitless, but I think they had 2 or 3 hits throughout this whole game. They did have the 1 run on the top of the third on a bases loaded, 2-out walk from Pete Alonso. That's it. They had the bases loaded 1 out for Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. Soto struck out, and Alonso was able to, with 2 outs, was able to draw a walk, I think, and then Brandon Nimmo came up and he popped out. But bases loaded 1 out, and he can only muster 1 run out of it. But we get to the top of the third, and finally, the Mets offense does what they should do. They came right back, but again, it started with the top of the order. But you got the hit from a guy who really, really needed a hit like this. Who really, really needed a hit like this. Mark Vientos. Hey, Mark Vientos. Good to see you. Been a while. So this inning starts off with Brandon Nimmo getting a base hit. Lindor draws a walk. Soto draws a walk. Pete Alonso comes up. Oh, reliable, right? Pete Alonso. Oh, reliable. Pete Alonso. You think, oh, he's going to come through again, but he doesn't. He strikes out. Okay. So Pete Alonso strikes out. So someone else has to step up in this situation. Someone else has to. Here comes Mark Vientos, who has struggled all season long. Just come back from the injured list. So you think, okay, Mark, this is the time. This is the time. This is it. This is the time for you to get a hit here. This is the time to show that clutchness you showed last year, how good you were in this down the stretch last year, and how good you were in the postseason this year, and how if you can get a big hit here, hey, that should dispel confidence of yourself, right? That should give yourself some confidence as you head to the second half. 2 strikes on Mark Vientos. Two strikes on Mark Vientos, and he ropes a 2-2 slider. He ropes a 2-2 slider down the right center field, 107.7 on the exit velo, clears the bases, and the Mets take a 4-3 lead. If there was anybody on this team that it's so big, not just for Mark Vientos, but to see somebody pick up one of the big five guys, right? Soto didn't, if Soto doesn't get the job done, or Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, McNeil, then someone else has to, right? Someone else has to. Pete Alonso didn't get the job done. Yeah, he struck out. Sometimes that happens, right? Soto was even struck out. Soto struck out a couple of times. It just happens. So someone else has to step up. Someone has to take the bat and get the big hit. And for this game, it was the guy that you probably wanted to see do it. And that was you probably wanted to see get the big hit was Mark Vientos. And he ropes a double to right down the right center field. They take the lead 4-3. Uh, they get it. They go into the top of the ninth. Need to get insurance runs. Got to get insurance runs, right? Diaz is warming up, but hey, be nice to get insurance runs here on the road. Tyrone Taylor gets a double. Brandon Nimmo walks, and Francisco Lindor, it's a 3-run homer, and just like that, it's 7-3. Juan Soto steps up to the plate. He hits a homer in the left center field. Just like that, it's 8-3. This is how good this offense can be. When the big hat, I said it before, but when the big hitters are hitting, when the big bats are hitting, and when you see something like Mark Vientos step up like that, that's how good this offense can be. If this offense can be like this, there's they can do a lot of big great things in October. To me, it's not about the pitching. I should save this for later in the show, but it's not about the pitching. It's about the offense and the hitting for this team, in my opinion. But Mark Vientos, I think maybe you can look. We can. It's. I think this game, and even the comeback against Baltimore, but I certainly think this game can be looked at and say, okay, that's the game. Hopefully, this is the game that turns around Mark Vientos' season. Because if Mark Vientos can take this game, and he had a good series against Kansas City, he's hit the ball hard in the last couple of games, and he had a good series against Kansas City. But if he can take this game, specifically this game in this moment, and translate into a big second half, man, that adds so much to this offense. Goodness, because they need it. They need one of their young players, Vientos, Mauricio, Beatty, Alvarez when he's back. They need one of their players to step up and really join in the fray of Alonso, Soto, Lindor, Nimmo, McNeil. They really need that. And if you can get that from Vientos, especially with the season he had last year, that adds so much. But nobody on this team, nobody on this offense needed a hit like that, just like more than Mark Vientos. For him to step up with two strikes, by the way, two strikes against Carlos Estevez, and get that double to right center field, give the Mets the lead, give them momentum, and give them the big hit they needed to win this game. Obviously they got some more runs with Lindor and Soto, but the big hit was Vientos. That was such a big win. And after the doubleheader loss, especially in Game 1 to the Orioles, man, they needed a win like that to get that mojo back that they had against the Yankees and the Brewers and the comeback against Baltimore. Just to not to have that doubleheader, go into a 3-game losing streak, right? And you go, oh, here we go, another losing streak for this team. So that was such a big moment, a big win for this team, really. Good for Mark Vientos, and he needed it. Game 2, they win 3-1. Not much offense, but they got what they had to. But not much offense. But Juan Soto, one of their two big bats, Juan Soto and Jeff McNeil. Juan Soto gets just an absolute tank of a home run into the water in right center field, Kansas City, 106.6 miles an hour, 435 feet, 30-degree launch angle, and he sent that thing to orbit. For his 23rd home run of the season, he leads the team in home runs. Juan Soto enters the All-Star break, leading the Mets in home runs. Juan Soto had 9 home runs heading into the month of June, and he finishes the first half of the season with 23. If you want to know how good Juan Soto's been since May 30th or whatever, that's how good he's been. But he hits a home run in the top of the 4th. Jeff McNeil gets an insurance run at the top of the 9th to make it 3-1. But the story of this game is the Mets pitching. I think this was the kind of win the Mets have had really all season long, where the pitching has really been the focal point. Get enough of the offense, and the pitching's been the focal point. Frankie Montas pitched really well for the third start and four for the three out of four starts. Excuse me, 3 out of 4 starts. Frankie Montes has been pretty solid. Again, not great. I'm not going to say he was he's just like what Severino did and Manaea did, but he's been good enough in his three of the last 4 starts, and in his three of his first 4 starts. And on Saturday, 5 innings, 4 hits, 5 strikeouts. I thought he was really effective. His ERA is still a little bloated from the bad start against Pittsburgh, but still, aside from the Pittsburgh start, he's been pretty solid. And I think you have to give him a lot of credit, especially considering the struggles in the minor leagues. I think you have to, he missed most of this. He missed most of the season due to injury. You have to applaud him for it. So good start for him. Nice start for him, in three of his first 4 starts. Good for him. Good to see him have another quality outing. They're going to need that in the second half of the season for Frankie Montes. So, but a good start for him. Reed Garrett comes in the 6th inning because Montes got into a bit of trouble in the 6th. They give him a double, but Reed Garrett comes in, gets out of it. Reed Garrett comes in and gets out of it. Um, uh, the run that Garrett does give up was a Montez run, but still Garrett was able to get out of the jam again, like Garrett's done really all season long. Davinsky pitches a shutout inning in the 7th inning, and then Carlos Mendoza says, "Edwin, you're pitching 6 outs in a 2-1 ball game, bottom of the 8th. Hey, Carlos Mendoza said, let's just win the series here. Let's win the series here. Let's not wait till Sunday. Let's not see, let's just win the series now, and let's play with house money the next day." And that's what he did. That's what he did. He put in Edwin Diaz, and I think this was not just good to win the series here, but it was a good test because Edwin Diaz is going to do a lot more of this in the second half of the season. You know, you know, pitching a 6 out save. He's going to do a lot of this, or at least maybe a few or whatever. There's going to be a game like this, a couple of series or so where the Mets are going to need it, and they're going to count on Diaz, give him 6 outs, and something that Diaz is familiar with. He did it plenty with, something Diaz is familiar with, you know. So, but I like this a lot that Carlos Mendoza chose Saturday's game to say, Edwin, 6 outs, get me 6 outs. Let's go for the win. Let's get a win here. Let's get the win. Let's get a series win. And I think it also helped the fact that he had Sean Manaea. He had Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea pitching tomorrow on Sunday. So I think that's what also helped. Diaz comes in there. He gets 6 outs. There was the big moment in the 8th inning where they threw out Bobby Witt on the replay review. And second game in a row, because this happened yesterday too. The Mets threw out one of the runners one of the Royals base runners on a close play at second base, and they were able to tag him out because there was a little bit where the Royal kind of leg, torso, whatever, leg, arm was kind of up a bit, and they kept the tag on him. And this moment here, it happened with Bobby Witt on Saturday. That was a big play. They got the out call there. Big play, big moment of the game. Diaz, a couple big catches too from Tyrone Taylor in this game too, especially one in the 9th inning. Diaz pitches a 6-out save. The Mets win the game 3-1, and they win the series. Hey, they win the series, you can go to the All-Star break saying, hey, we got a series win. We've won 3 of our last 4 series, and you get a little bit of momentum. Good win for the Mets. Again, this was the kind of win they've had really all season long. Close. Your pitching does most of the work. You get a little bit from your offense, just a bit, not a lot, but just enough to win. And they're able to win the game 3-1. Good defense too. Good moments from Torrens and Lindor's play, on defense, and good defensive play too by a couple of nice defensive plays too. I think from Beatty and Acuna and Lindor. So they're able to win this game and win the series. So they go into Sunday with a bit of house money. And I think if you were a Met fan, you wanted to see Clay Holmes finish the season strong, which he did, and you wanted to see Sean Manaea pitch really well. And 9th inning aside, he did. The only thing we have to talk about it, is the Mets offensive runners in scoring position. They were 1 for 7 runners in scoring position. They had a lot of chances to score in this game and didn't. Mark Vientos hit a triple with 1 out in the first inning. He didn't score. So yeah, this was another loss that the Mets had on Sunday, where again they lost because they couldn't score runners in scoring position. So it's interesting. They had a game on Saturday where that's where they've won most. That's how they've won most of their games. Then they had a game on Sunday where that's how they've lost most of their games. But you want to see, but again, with the series already won, would have been nice to get a sweep. But with the series already won, you wanted to see how Clay Holmes would do and how Sean Manaea would do. Clay Holmes was good. 5 innings, 5 hits, 2 1 runs, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk. Pitched pretty well. He goes into the All-Star break with a 3.31 ERA. And the return of the tribal chief, Sean Manaea. I did my little wrestling, little wrestling thing. Sean Manaea, the tribal chief, the return of Sean Manaea, he looked impressive. He actually pitched the rest of the game, which I was a little surprised by that. He went 3 1/3, 5 hits, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. I think he had a stretch where he pitched where he struck out 5 Royals in a row. He was very impressive. And if Sean Manaea could pitch like that the second half of the season, again, that does so much for this Mets rotation. Especially at the top of the rotation. This was such a good day for Sean. I know the ninth inning will kind of the ninth inning to me. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the ninth inning to me, it's like, you know what, Mets did come back, tied the game early at 2-2. Jeff McNeil hit a triple, which made it 2-1 after a base hit, and then Jared Young, who came back after Jesse Winker's injury. Again, we'll talk about Winker in a second. Jared Young gets a sacrifice fly. They tie the game. Again, the ninth inning, maybe was, but to me, it wasn't about the ninth inning for Sean Manaea, because again, he's not going to pitch ninth innings, I guess, barring a playoff game, But Manaea overall, I thought he's the biggest thing coming for this game for me, because you want to see how he looked, you want to see how he pitched, and I thought he was very impressive. Slider was great, fastball up and away was perfect. He looked like last year's guy. So Sean Manaea to me is exactly the thing you come out of this game looking at. I'm not saying forget about the loss or whatever. Again, would have been nice to sweep. Would have been nice for the Mets to enter the All-Star break with a sweep. But to me, they lost the game not in the ninth inning with Manaea. They lost the game because they couldn't score a run in scoring position through the first 8 innings of the game. They're 1 for 7. But biggest takeaway was Holmes pitching really well. The biggest thing for me was Clay Holmes finishing the first half pretty well. I thought he pitched well. Good first half for him. I think Sean Manaea in his return outing was very good. Very good, very strong. Very effective, very good, very strong. I think if Manaea looks like that in the second half, you get that Manaea, just like you got that Manaea in the second half of last year. Again, that adds a lot to this rotation. And again, it's big. It's very big, and it adds a lot to this rotation. So, with the Mets taking 2 out of 3 from the Kansas City Royals, we head to the All-Star break. Tonight's the Home Run Derby. I'll make a prediction at the very end of the show. We'll look at the field. When we enter the All-Star break tomorrow night, the All-Star game, 8 o'clock, we have the Mets being represented by 4 All-Stars. David Peterson. Congratulations to David Peterson. That was announced a few days ago. Peterson was an All-Star. I think it was announced after the doubleheader. I think after Game 1, the doubleheader after he pitched. He is an All-Star. Congratulations to him. Coming off the hip surgery, he had a couple of rough seasons. He had the hip surgery, come back. He's pitched very effectively the last 2 years now. Congratulations to him for making the All-Star. I think that's really cool for him to make the All-Star team. He is, of course, joining Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and Edwin Diaz. Still no Juan Soto yet, but it looks like Juan Soto will not make the All-Star team this year. Juan Soto, in my opinion, should be an All-Star. But, hey, what are you going to do? But congratulations to David Pearson. He is an All-Star, and I think that's really cool for him. So the All-Star game is tomorrow. Let's take a look at where the Mets are as we enter the All-Star break. The Mets were in first place after Saturday, but with Sunday's loss, the Phillies beat the Padres. The Phillies enter the All-Star break. The Philadelphia Phillies enter the All-Star break a half game up on the Mets. The Phillies 55-41. The Mets enter the All-Star break 55-42, a half game back of the Phillies. And the Mets also have the second wild card spot, 2.5 games up on the San Diego Padres, who have the third wild card spot, 2.5 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers, who have the top wild card spot. The Milwaukee Brewers, after the Mets beat them 2 out of 3, have come back strong. They've won 7 in a row. They swept the Dodgers. So the Milwaukee Brewers, after that 2 out of 3 loss to the Mets, have come back really strong. Hey, it's a good baseball team. So just for, again, it's the first half. But hypothetically speaking, if the playoffs were to start today, The Los Angeles Dodgers would get the first round bye. They lead the National League West at 58 and 39. They have the best record in the entire National League. They are 58 and 39, only by a game. 50 because the Dodgers have really kind of the Dodgers really struggled down the last week or so, 2 weeks of the first half. But the Dodgers, to recap, like I said, the National League East at the first half. Well, let's go through the divisions. In the National League East, Phillies up by over the Mets by a half game, followed by the Marlins at 44 and 51. The Miami Marlins in third place at the All-Star break. I think if you were to say that the Miami Marlins were in third place in the All-Star break, you would say, hey, it's pretty good for the Marlins, right? But obviously, a lot of that's because of the Atlanta Braves. They're 42 and 53 in fourth place. They're 12 and a half back. And the Washington Nationals, 38 and 58, 17 games back. And the National League Central looks like it's a two-team race, maybe a three-team or four-team race. But right now, it's the Cubs at 57-39. The Cubs are really good. They're really impressive. They're just coming off winning 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium against the Yankees. They're at 57 and 39. They're a game ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers at 56 and 40. They're in second place. The St. Louis Cardinals followed by them, 51 and 46, 6.5 back. I think if you're the Cardinals, you certainly take that. There was not many high expectations for the Cardinals coming to the season, but you look at where they are now. They're competitive, 51 and 46. They're only, let's see, how far are they from the wild card spot? They're only a game and a half or a half game behind, one game behind the Giants for the fourth spot, a game and a half behind the Padres for the third wild card spot. So the Cardinals and Cincinnati Reds are right there in that wild card race. The Reds 50 and 47 at 7.5 back in the division, and followed by the Pittsburgh Pirates at 39, 58, 18.5 back. In the National League West, Dodgers have kind of separated themselves. Even with the Dodgers struggling, they've still got a decent room here. They actually have the biggest room of all the National League. They are 5.5 up on the Padres at 58 and 39. Padres 52 and 44, 5.5 back. Giants 52 and 45, 6 back. The Padres currently have the third wildcard spot. Giants are a half game behind the Padres for the third wildcard spot. The Arizona Diamondbacks, boy, I was really hoping for them to have a bounce back season. They just missed the playoffs last year. So the Mets got that wildcard spot right over the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks 47 and 50, 11 games back, and it looks like they're up for sale. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eugenio Suarez. Looks like they'll be a big seller in a few weeks. So we'll see what happens there. And of course, the Colorado Rockies at 22 and 74, 35.5 back, of course. Go to the American League now. The American League East, the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, if you were to tell me the Blue Jays were in first place any of the All-Star break, I would say I'd be a little bit surprised. But they aren't, with the Yankees' recent struggles, and it continued in the end of the first half after losing to the Cubs. With the Yankees' recent struggles, the Blue Jays sweeping the Yankees 4 games. The Blue Jays enter the All-Star break 2 games up on the Yankees. They're in first place at 55 and 41. The Yankees follow up at 53 and 43. The Boston Red Sox. Yes, folks, the hot Boston Red Sox. Now, let's pump the brakes though on the Red Sox. They did take advantage of teams like, let's take a look at the Boston Red Sox schedule for a second. They beat Tampa Bay, who Tampa Bay has. Let's see. They did sweep Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay has kind of struggled a bit as of late. They swept Colorado. They swept Washington. So, and they did they sweep the Reds? Okay, they took 2 out of 3 from the Reds. Okay, they took 2 out of 3 from the Reds, who are kind of inconsistent right now. But they're still around the wild card race. But again, they beat up on the Nationals, who are struggling mightily. They beat up on the Rockies, who are struggling mightily. They did sweep Tampa, 4 in a row. But Tampa, I think, the Tampa is kind of struggling a bit as we head. Tampa was struggling as we head into the halfway point of the season. Tampa Bay now 50 and 47, 5.5 back. Boston's red hot. They've won 10 in a row. They're 53 and 45, 3 games back. And Jeff Passan said today that apparently that right now they're going for it. They're not sellers. They're not going to trade Aroldis Chapman, et cetera. Aaron Durant. Right now they're buyers. In a few weeks, the Boston Red Sox. But I'm not fully buying into the Boston Red Sox right now. I like the Red Sox, but I'm not fully buying into them. They've won 10 in a row, I know. They feel great about themselves, as they should. But a lot of this was on a Rays team that was struggling a bit. And, of course, the Nationals who have struggled mightily, and they stink. And the Rockies, of course, are the Rockies. But we'll see how Boston does coming into the All-Star break. Let's take a look at the Boston Red Sox schedule for a second as we enter as the All-Star break in the second half. The Boston Red Sox play the Chicago Cubs to begin the half. Then they also play the Philadelphia. Oh, boy. Boston's schedule to begin the second half. Again, this is why I'm not fully buying into the Red Sox and why I'm not sure if they're going to be buyers or if they're going to be buyers at the trade deadline. Again, The Red Sox, where they will be after these next 9 games will determine what they do in a few weeks, whether they're buyers or sellers. They get Chicago on the road for 3, really good baseball team, maybe the best in the National League. The Phillies on the road, and then they get the Dodgers. Let's see how before they get Minnesota. So they could beat up on Minnesota after, but let's see where the Red Sox are. I know Jeff Passan said what he said earlier today on the Pat McAfee show. I understand. Boston is about, I understand. You're the Red Sox. You're about winning. It's about winning. I get it. I understand it. But let's see where they are after the Cubs, Phillies, and Dodgers. 9 games with the 3 of the best teams in the National League. Let's see where they are. If they come out of it swinging and play good, then they're going to be buyers. If not, Chapman and Duran and some others still could be available for trade. And if you're the Mets, go look for that. You need a starting center fielder. Jarren Duran, I think, would be great for that. I also think Cedric Mullins is a guy they should really look for too. And of course, bullpen Aroldis Chapman. They should really go over Aroldis Chapman. But let's see where the Red Sox are after that 9-game stretch. We'll see where they are. But again, followed by the Baltimore Orioles at 43 and 52 at 11.5 back. They played really well as of late, but still have a lot of room to make up. They should be heavy buyers, heavy sellers in a few weeks. In the AL Central, the Detroit Tigers, they are running away with this thing. 59-38, they're 11.5 up on the Minnesota Twins. They're the only team with a winning record. 47-49 is Minnesota. 47-50 Kansas City Royals. 12 games back to Cleveland Guardians. 46-49, 12 games back. And of course, Chicago White Sox 32-65, 27 back. In the AL West, the Astros lead the division. What a surprise. The Houston Astros 56-40. They're 5 up on the Mariners, 51-45. The Texas Rangers 48-49. They're 8.5 back. Looks like they'll be sellers. Who knows what they do? The Los Angeles Angels 47-49, 9 games back. But honestly, if you were to tell an Angels fan that you'd be right around the 500 mark at the All-Star break, I think they would take it. They'd be okay with it. And then, of course, there's the Athletics at 41-50, at 41-57, 16 games back in the American League wild card. The American League wild card looks the Yankees, Red Sox, and Mariners as the 3 wild card spots. Tampa Bay, 1.5, Texas 3.5 back. But again, a lot of room to make up for if you're a Texas and Tampa. But Tampa Bay's still a 1.5 back, so we'll see what happens there. But the Yankees, Red Sox, and Mariners enter the All-Star break as the top 3 wild card spots. So that's your recap of where things are in Major League, not just in the National League East, and not just where the Mets are, but around Major League Baseball as teams, as everyone's going to Atlanta for the All-Star game and the All-Star break. It's time for the grades for the New York Mets of the 2025 season. My pen. It's time for the grades for the New York Mets in the 2025 season. These are my personal grades. If you disagree, please leave a comment. If you agree with it, if you disagree, whether you agree or not, disagree with it, please leave a comment. What do you think of my grades? 55-42. It's where the Mets are as they enter the All-Star break. I know people are going to say, well, it's kind of a disappointment because, they had a 5.5, 6.5 game lead in the division on June 14th, and they lost that division. And now they're a half game behind. They kind of traded places with the Phillies. They've kind of been trading places with the Phillies over the last week or so. They're in second place, a half game back. But you do have to factor in the injuries to the pitching, the bullpen, starting rotation, Marte and Winker. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to talk about Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker went back on the injured list. The pop-up that he had in the game against the Orioles in Game 1, he injured his back on that one, and he's now on the injured list. So now the Mets don't have any of their Starling Marte is scheduled to be back. It looks like he'll be back on Friday, but Jesse Winker is now back on the injured list, and that sucks for him. It's actually when I was thinking about it, it's actually the second time this season Jesse Winker has gotten hurt swinging a bat. He actually got hurt in spring training swinging a bat, but he didn't go on the injured list or anything like that. But unfortunately, this was bad enough to where they had to pull him from the game, and now he's back on the injured list, and that sucks. That really does. You feel for Jesse Winker. That stinks for him. It's been a tough year for Jesse Winker. It's been a tough year for him. He just came back, and now he's out again. He's a gamer. He's a guy who wants to be out there with the guys. He wants to be in the clubhouse. He doesn't want to be hurt. He wants to be out there in the field. So you feel for Jesse Winker. But the Mets obviously closed the season out with injuries to DH. Marte is scheduled to be back on Friday. It looks like they've had little production from center field. Tyrone Taylor's been great on defense, but again, offensively, he really struggled, especially down the last first half of the season. They've been mixing and matching with Mauricio and Beatty, and Vientos has been out, and he just came back. Alvarez got sent down. Torrens has really struggled at the plate since taking over. And, um, so, again, like I said, the offense has been very top five heavy and hoping, let's see if they can get much at 6, 7, 8, 9. But, and then pitching wise, injuries to Montez, who just came back, injuries to Manaea, who just came back on Sunday, injury now to Senga, Paul Blackburn injury. So they've been mixing and matching with the pitching, trying to figure things out. I understand the fan disappointment for them not being in first place, and I understand because they had that bad stretch in June. I'm still going to give the team where their record, just where their record is and where they stand, where their record is. I'll give them an A minus. Yes, an A plus would be the grade if they were in first place, but I'll give them an A minus because they're still in the playoff hunt. They're only a half game out, despite all the injuries, despite the mixing and matching, sending down Alvarez and all those things like that. They're still in the second wild card spot. They are still only a half game behind the Phillies, so I'll give them an A minus as a team. We'll go to the pitching. Starting rotation, I think gets an A. They get an A for me. They probably get the highest grade. You couldn't, like I said, Holmes, you maybe would have liked a little bit better out of Holmes the last couple starts, but overall he's been pretty good. He transitioned from a reliever closer to a starting pitcher. Peterson's been very consistent. Senga has been very good overall. Just stunk he got hurt, but those couple weeks, but he's back and he's pitched really well. Montez, like I said, 3 of his 4 starts has been good. They've had to do spot starts here and there with guys, whether it's Blake Tidwell, et cetera, Justin Hageman or Brandon Waddell, especially with bullpen games. But overall, the starting, get Griffin Canning. How can I forget about Griffin Canning? Griffin Canning is largely a reason for the Mets being where they are right now, because Canning was so good. I mean, and again, he pitched so well against Chicago. He pitched so well against 3 of the best offenses in all of baseball: the Cubs, the Dodgers on the road, and the Yankees on the road. He was so good, and that's why it stings that he's hurt with a torn Achilles. It really does. It's such a bummer because he was so good, you know. So the starting rotation gets an A. They are the biggest reason why the Mets are where they are right now. The bullpen, they're a bit of a different story. I'll give them a B, but boy, if this was the first 2 months, I would have given them an A. It was so good. Overall, as a whole, they were so good the first 2 months of the season. Then in June, Reed Garrett, Brazoban, Stanek's inconsistencies really picked up. Kranick struggled a lot. Now, unfortunately, Kranick is hurt and he's in AAA, and now he's in the minors after they sent him down. Now he has to get Tommy John. Daniel Nunez came back, and more injury news, obviously. Daniel Nunez, he comes back from the injury, pitches well. Actually, he struggled. They sent him back down. Came back, he pitched well. Unfortunately, gets hurt again, and now he needs Tommy John. So that really stinks for Daniel Nunez. The bullpen, again, first 2 months, I would have given them an A plus, but I think I gave it a B because of the recent struggles in the middle of the pen, and the fact that right now in this bullpen, Edwin Diaz is like the only guy you can really trust. I know Garrett's still been pretty solid and effective, but even Garrett, you don't know. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. Edwin Diaz is really the only guy I think you trust right now in that bullpen. You don't know what you're getting out of Brazoban right now. You don't know what you're getting out of Stanek right now. You don't know what you're getting out of Reed Garrett. You don't know what you're getting. And of course, you're throwing in Richard Lovelady and Brandon Waddell, et cetera, et cetera. They're missing pieces. They're missing pieces right now. That's what they are. That's what's going on. Of course, AJ Minter out for the season, Danny Young out for the season. They're missing pieces. So we'll see in a few weeks if David Stern's going to add more pieces. I think they need to add a couple more arms to that bullpen. Starting Friday, they could be getting some reinforcements. Jose Budo should be coming back by Friday from the injured list from his illness. And Brooks Raley looks like he could be back by Friday. So actually, Carlos Mendoza gave an update on Jose Budo's status. He said he's going to Port St. Lucie. Jose Budo will do a rehab outing, I think tomorrow he will do a rehab start. He's going to Port St. Lucie, Mendoza said. I think he's going to pitch in a game on Tuesday. That's what Mendoza said. And then we'll see where we're at, how he recovers. after that outing and see if he's available on Friday or if he needs another one or two. But the good thing is that he's going to be pitching in games on Tuesday. So looks like it'll depend for Jose Budo on Tuesday. If he pitches well and he looks good, then he'll be back on Friday. If not, or if they want to see more from him, it could be another game or two in the minor. So for the Mets, for this bullpen, let's hope Budo has a good day tomorrow, and then he's there on Friday on to begin the second half. But it looks like Brooks Raley, who has been very good in his rehab. I mean, the contrast to Frankie Montez, but Raley has pitched really well in his rehab outings. I don't think he's given up a run in his rehab outing, so he should be hopefully back by Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So reinforcement should be coming for the Mets bullpen with the returns of Budo and Raley, especially Raley. They could really use a lefty out of that bullpen right now. But they do need to add another arm or two. And I think that's something David Stearns is looking at very closely in a few weeks. But I give the bullpen, my final grade for the bullpen, I give it a B. If this was April and May, I give it an A. But right now, I think I give it a B. It's tough. Right now, their bullpen's trying to again mix things up, trying to fix where they're at, see where they're at. But the only guy I trust right now is Edwin Diaz. That's it. Reed Garrett's been solid. Reed Garrett's been effective all season long. He did have that rough stretch, but he's come back pretty well. So I think I still semi trust Reed Garrett, but sometimes I still don't know what I'm going to get from him. The only guy I fully trust is Edwin Diaz. So, but I'm giving them a B because they were so good through the first 2 months. You know, but you just got to hope Brazoban picks it up. You really got to hope Stanek picks it up. You really got to hope Stanek picks it up. They're the two guys I'm looking at, Brazoban and Stanek. And you got to hope Brooks Raley is a consistent lefty out of the pen. You got to hope Budo gets a little more consistent. He was pitching pretty well before his illness, but you got to hope Budo gets a little bit more consistent. And so got to hope Stearns gets another arm or two in that bullpen just to kind of ease that bridge up to Edwin Diaz. So all you got to do, got to get the bridge to Edwin Diaz. So bullpen, I'd give it a B. The offense, I'll give him a C plus, and I'll tell you why. It's the runners in scoring position. It's the runners in scoring position. It's that simple. I'll give him a C plus because Nimmo's been very good. Lindor's been very good. Alonso's been, I think, an MVP candidate for most of the season. McNeil's had a very nice, surprisingly good season. He's needed that. And Juan Soto has been red hot through the last month and a half. He's been red hot to close out the first half, after a very inconsistent hot and cold first 2 months, but he's really picked it up in the last month and a half. He's looked like the Juan Soto that you want to see. I'll give them a C plus for that, but it's the runners in scoring position that still is a struggle for them. They enter the halfway point of the season, the second or third or so worst team in baseball with runners in scoring position. It's something they got to fix, and again, you got to factor in Vientos' struggles this season, Beatty's hot and cold inconsistencies. I mean, Mauricio just came up and he's played well, not great, but he's played well. Cunha really regressing. Acuna, man, again, if Luis Angel Acuna could just get on base, he could be an electrifying player. But right now, Acuna right now is a defensive guy who's a pinch runner. If he could just hit and get on base and be the guy he was in late September last year and September last year and April when he won Rookie of the Month, he could be very good. He just needs to get on base, but the last 2 or so months have been a struggle for him. Of course, Alvarez struggled a lot. He got sent down to the minors. Torrens, of course, was hot to begin the season, but he's really struggled. Tyrone Taylor really struggled, at the plate. So it's hard for me to give the offense anything more than a C plus. So look, for the offense to get better, it's those top 5 guys to continue hitting. It's for Vientos to hopefully continue his good finish the last 3 or so games. Hopefully he continues and he has a good second half. Hopefully Francisco Alvarez is back pretty soon. Hopefully Friday, and he can hit. I mean, Alvarez, but hopefully he's back, by Friday. So, they need him to be productive. Alvarez has hit 8 home runs in AAA at this point. Alvarez has hit 8 home runs in AAA. I know his batting average still ain't the best, but it's great to see him hit for power. So they need all those guys, You know, they need all those young players, they need all those guys to step up, or at least just a few of them. And by a few, I mean Vientos and Alvarez. That's really the two big ones, you know, and they need to get better at running scoring position. So it's a C plus for me for their offense. It's a C plus for me. I want it. I would love it for it to be higher, and I understand they've still scored a lot of runs overall, but it's the runners in scoring position. It's the runners in scoring position. It's got to get better. You can't be the second worst team runs in scoring position, you know, and expect to go deep in October. Heck, you might not be able to do that and make the playoffs. You know, that kind of struggle on scoring position could still cost you a playoff spot. So they need to fix that quickly. They need to pick that up quickly. Hopefully Stearns gets them a starting. I think Stearns needs to get them a starting center fielder in a few weeks. But you need Vientos and you need Alvarez to get back going and to be the guys they were Vientos last year, to be the guys that are potentially capable to be their potential. The what Vientos was last year and what Alvarez was 2 years ago. And hopefully Mauricio can continue to hit a little bit like he's done so far. So hopefully Acuna can get back on. Hopefully Beatty can get his back going again consistently because he's had great defense at third base. So those are my grades for the first half, at least for the players, for the team. Carlos Mendoza, I'll give him a B plus. I think Mendoza has been able to weather the storm a bit throughout the struggles. I said before, this was his biggest test. And I think for him to finish, to get out of that storm and finish the first half with 3 out of 4 series wins, I think is good. There's still been some decisions where I'm kind of questioning him and wondering about his managing of the bullpen. But I can understand though, because again, he's been mixing and matching with the bullpen as of late. I'm not going to blame it all on him. And again, I can't really blame him much when the offense can't score runs consistently. I think I put that more on the hitting coaches, but I give Mendoza B plus. I think he's done an overall solid job. And I think he was able to do a good job getting out of this bad stretch that they were on and win 3 of the last 4 series and should have won the last 4 series. Hey, if you don't go 1 for 11, you win the series against the Orioles too. So I'll give Mendoza a B plus. So those are my grades so far for the New York Mets for the 2025 first half of the season. On Friday, we will talk about the second half of the season, discuss where I think they'll be, what I think the preview is, or how I think they're going to do, what to expect. Trade deadline. We'll talk a little bit about the trade deadline. We'll get to at the trade deadline itself. I want to do a live show on YouTube and see, go through all the moves going on, every team, the Mets, etc. So I'll have that going on. We'll watch on MLB Network or ESPN, probably MLB Network, and see all the trades and where everyone's getting and who's buying, who's selling, et cetera, et cetera. See what the Mets do, what their activities are. So I'm going to do a live show there on the trade deadline. I do, Friday is David Wright Day. Friday is David Wright Day. David Wright will get his number retired. We'll talk a lot about David Wright. So we'll preview on MazzaOnMets on Friday. We'll preview second half of the season, their series against the Cincinnati Reds. And we'll talk a lot about David Wright. Talk a lot about his career, what he means to me as a fan personally, what he means to a lot of Met fans. It's going to be a special day, a special weekend. Actually, his special on Thursday on SNY looks really good. I look forward to watching it. It's on 6:30 on Thursday night. So I really look forward to watching it. I've heard it's a 2-hour special, on SNY. All the other specials that the Mets have done, SNY has done for Gary Carter, Mike Piazza, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez, Dwight Gooden. All of them have been an hour. All of them have been an hour. This one's 2. So I really look forward to seeing. What this is and how this goes, because this one seems like this one looks like it's going to be a good one. So I look forward to his documentary. But there's a lot to talk about David Wright that I want to say for Friday, because David Wright means so much to the Met fans. He means so much to the Mets organization. He's one of the few guys on the Mets who have played from start to finish. The Mets have never really had guys, in their careers who have played from start to finish. Obviously David Wright might be a bit of a different case because his career got cut short due to injuries. You know, his career obviously with injuries, but but he's still one of those few players that have really that starting. Ed Kranepool's the other one that started and finished his career as a Met. So there's a lot of talk about David Wright on Friday as we celebrate as he gets number retired. He might be the last number we see for a while. I've always said Jose Reyes, but we'll see. It seems like Jose Reyes is going to be a bit of a interesting one. I've always thought Jose Reyes would be a short thing, but it seems like he's not a short thing. His number retired. I think Carlos Beltran would be very well be the next one because he's certainly going to go in the Hall of Fame very soon. And looks like he's going to go on as a Met, right? Yeah, a lot of his career highlights came as a Met. He spent I think the majority of his career really as a Met, even more so than as a Kansas City Royal. I'd love for Gary Carter wearing his jersey right now. I'd love for Gary Carter one day to get his number retired. That is long overdue. That should have been done years ago. Um, but it looks like David Wright's number retirement. The Mets have done all these number retirements last couple of years, from Jerry Kuzman to Willie Mays to Keith Hernandez to Dwight Gooden to Dallas Strawberry, and now David Wright on Friday. It seems like David Wright's number could be for a bit till we see the next one. Hopefully that one's Jose Reyes, Gary Carter, Carlos Beltran. So that might be the next ones we see. But we'll see. But we'll see when that will happen. It looks like David Wright, he'll get his number retired, and might be a bit for the Mets retire another number. But we'll see. Like I said, I would love to see Gary Carr's number get retired. I'd love to see Jose Reyes' number eventually get retired. And I love to see even a special commemorative number for Ed Kranepool. Even a special one for Ed Kranepool. I think he certainly deserves it. Um, and of course Carlos Beltran. So, but we'll see. But we'll talk more about David Wright and his career on Friday on MazzaOnMets. Could be a busy week too. I'd love to do a Mazzon Jets tomorrow. A lot to talk about. Garrett Wilson just got his contract extension done, so a lot to talk about there with Garrett Wilson, his contract, and what that means for the Jets, and what that means for other contracts for Jermaine Johnson and Sauce Gardner, et cetera. Will McDonald. I'd love to do a little bit Mazzon Ravens either Wednesday or Thursday. Some lists to talk about. Obviously, there's an ESPN list that came out ranking the quarterbacks. So love to talk about there especially with training camp on the way. Training camp is coming up next week. We're already, like I said before, we're at football season. It's the All-Star break, and we're at football season right now, essentially. So well, hopefully, I'd like to get Mazzon Jets done Tuesday or Wednesday. Mazzon Ravens either Thursday or Friday, either on Thursday. Another Mazzon Mets previewing the second half and David Wright Day on Friday. And on Saturday or Sunday, I'd like to do Mazza on wrestling. I've been meaning to get the meaning to get the wrestling show out. A lot to talk about, obviously, with wrestling. Got to talk about All In, talk about Evolution, both really great shows. Talk about Saturday night's main event. Monday Night Raw is tonight. So a lot to get into there. Hopefully we can get a Mazza wrestling show sometime this weekend. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for everything on the channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to MazzaOnMets. We will see you guys for more MazzaOnMets on Friday. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Leave a like, share, and comment, subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great day. And let's go Mets.